Let's start with the poetry.
Okay,
What poem do you generally start your readings with, and why?
it's such a good question. There is one poem that I start my readings with of late, and it's a poem that's in my new manuscript. Um, and I think um, the reason I like to start with it is that it has an instructive tone. It kind of instructs the listener, and as a result, maybe it establishes presence in my mind, or maybe it's just for me that it establishes a sense of presence for me. So this poem, it's called "See the Second," and it's an attempt at making visible the immateriality of time. See the second. See the second, like quick chalk marks vanishing. And look at the minute, how it has time to collect, like a raindrop on the underside of a railing, before it too falls into the past. Half an hour is a doorway to a hallway of bird flight and graph paper. An hour is a whole law library of time, high ceiling with a fray of clouds, below which the students are sitting and studying as if they were being filmed. And the day itself is nothing, nothing but a towering aviary of light we are in.
Wow, beautiful. Aviary of light we are in. Seeing the second. That's just beautiful. I'm not used to listening to poems first. I'm used to reading them and then reading them multiple times and then then understanding that. But I get the sense of timelessness, which I get a lot when I read your poems, and seeing the second, seeing the moment, and seeing and the double meaning, seeing the second.
Yeah.
Um, Beautiful.
Oh,
I love it. Um,
thank you.
what how did you write this poem? Did this come from someplace, or how did you think of this?
Oh, that's a great question. I can't even remember writing it. I think what happened was, yeah, I wanted to. I think I got the image of the chalk marks, like and then I truly, to be honest, I can't quite remember writing it, but I yeah, I remember I was happy when I said see the second, and then I realized I can say the second. That was a good way to continue. Um, Also because it was fun, I guess, to be able to say that. But it took me a long time to write it. My poems are generally very slow in sort of presenting themselves. And
Hmm.
I probably had, I think I sat for a while after the second stanza, which is about a minute, and then
Hmm.
I had to wait more than a half an hour to think up the half an hour bit. And then I remember I think I had like the through the hour, and then I was wondering what happens now. And then eventually, and sometimes it's weeks and months, and it's not like
Hmm.
I sit there ceaselessly, but I keep returning to a poem, and it is a kind of waiting for me.
Hmm.
So and then eventually, yeah, the day sort of
So
presented
how
itself.
so let me ask you a question I dread being asked. Uh,
Yes.
how many poems are in waiting?
Oh, a lot, actually, a lot. And I'm very slow. I mean, I was happy to hear that you said like you're a slow reader. I'm a slow reader and a slow writer. I like to take my time, which in this fast-paced world doesn't, so, sometimes it feels like it doesn't serve one, but I do take a long time to write. And I have this current manuscript I'm working on, it's getting closer. So I trust that I can finish it within the next few months, but there are still probably, I don't know, maybe 10 or 20 poems that are not finished. And so, yeah, so I have to sit with them.
Yeah, no, I agree. And anything that's art related, it's hard to tell how it comes, and it's hard to tell when.
Yeah.
But sometimes a poem is a gift. And has there been a poem that came to you fast?
Yes. Yeah.
Which one is that? And let's hear that.
Yeah. So that's one of those poems is When Our House Was Old, and often, you know, I think one might ask oneself, you know, where do poems come from? I think you asked that
Yes.
in one of your questions, and I was thinking from other poems, you know, and the Polish poet Adam Zagajewski, he has a poem that begins poems from poems, paintings from paintings, and then he goes on. And I believe that. So this poem came to me because I was reading the Spanish poet Federico García Lorca, and he has a poem called the Little Infinite Poem. And I was reading it in Robert Bly's translation. And in that poem, there's a line that goes, dead people hate the number 2.
Yeah.
And as soon as I read that, this poem came to me, because the next thing that came to my mind, so I wanted to ask, what about the number 3? You know?
Right.
So,
and so on.
And so this was written very quickly, which is unusual for me. But I'm happy to read it here. I should also say that this poem includes some in the synesthesia. I don't know if, are you familiar with synesthesia?
No.
So that's
I probably am, but I don't know the word.
Yeah, so that's when a person like number. So I have synesthesia. So for me, all numbers have colors, and all letters of the alphabet have colors. And that doesn't mean that every word is multicolored, you know, like so often a word will be kind of, you know, the first letter, the color of the first letter will dominate the word. When Our House Was Old. If it's true what Lorca said, that dead people hate the number 2, what do you suppose they think of the number 3? The number 3 that can vanish without a trace twice into the number 6 and 3 times into the number 9. I'll tell you, if I were dead, I'd love the number 9, because it's as if it's made of metal, and it's lilac colored and beautiful like a circle. And also because any number divisible by 9 itself adds up to 9. Take, for instance, the number 18 or 27 or 36. It's a puzzle that's immaterial and soundless like a shuttle only the dead travel by, from the horizon to the pawn shops in Vivian and back, or from the horizon to the stockyards in Omaha, and from the stockyards to Spain, and from Spain back in time to when our house was old and we had a lot of books, and Lorca was our light of eyelids and billfolds, of bitter roots and floating terraces.
Ah, so beautiful. Lorca was our light of eyelids and billfolds of bitter roots and floating terraces. So gorgeous. When I read this, of course it's talking about infinity, circularity, and mystery. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I was reminded of a mantra I sing. It's Guru Nanak's mantra. It's called the Mool mantra or the basic mantra, and it
Mm-hmm.
has 9 elements to it. So I
Oh,
have an album out there which goes through each element and meditates on each of those. And then
oh,
in the
beautiful.
end, there's a circle where it goes back, it just goes on and on and on.
Oh, beautiful.
And so there's something about 9 that, it's perfectly uh, it's perfect for a circle, even in terms of music. You go
Yes.
back to it, and it feels like you haven't ended, and then you
Yes.
start, and it
Yes.
feels like it's going on because you would end at 6,
Yeah.
but then if you end at 9, you feel like you need something else. So what you end up
Yes.
doing is you end up circling,
Yes.
and
Yes.
apparently you do. There's some other numerology associated with 108, also divisible
Yes.
by 9.
Yes.
The number of times you're supposed to repeat uh, and get emancipated. So it's
Yes.
beautiful. I love this poem. I didn't
Oh.
think of that the first time I read it, but
Mm-hmm.
I frankly had no clue who Lorca was. I thought it was a
Yeah.
a person. And of course, you mentioned this yesterday, so then I looked up who Lorca was, and then I read more about how he unfortunately perished.
Oh my
Uh,
God. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
but I've got a couple of questions about this one.
Mm-hmm.
When we lived back in time to when our house was old,
Mm-hmm.
that's such a thinker line.
Yeah.
It would seem when you go back, your house would be newer than it was not than what it was now.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
was really intrigued by that, and but I get it. I understand that I'm thinking the oldest house that we come from, and there are many poems about that. Um, Guru Nanak's poem about the universe being a house, and are you
Mm-hmm.
going back to that house? So I don't know if you would like to say anything about old house versus new house versus any house.
Yeah, I think I was when I wrote this, I I was living with my family in an old house, and
Mm.
I thought that um I don't know, I just wanted to reverse it. Uh because of course since then we've lived in many houses, some newer, some older. I don't know. I just wanted to play with time, I guess.
Mm. Yeah,
Uh
there's a circularity
yeah,
with time associated with the old and new, but
yeah,
you're going back to old.
yes. Yeah, so I guess I wanted to create some kind of tension somehow.
I also like Lorca. Of course, you're bringing in oneness. You're connecting spiritual and material worlds with the eyelids and the billfolds,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the eyelids being the eyelids. It was interesting that you didn't use eyes. He was
Mm-hmm.
the light of our light of eyelids and billfolds. I love it. And then you talk about bitter roots, and then I was
Mm-hmm.
reminded of Lorca, and then
Mm-hmm.
floating terraces. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, despair and hope. I I don't know if you intended that, but that's how I read it.
Yeah, I think I wanted to incorporate exactly like some despair and some levity at
Mm,
once towards the end. Yeah. And I think I was referring back um to some other Lorca poems too, like the bitter roots. It it's in his work. And yeah, so
mm,
I was borrowing that
mm.
or I
And
stole
I
it.
also love your other poem, Wake, which is a prose poem. It
Oh yeah. Yeah.
talks about Lorca as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Would you like
uh,
me to read it? I'm happy to read that if you
yeah,
would like.
let's read that. That's
Okay.
it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous.
Let's
Please.
see if I can find it.
I have a feeling we'll be sitting here a couple hours from now.
And if it's too much, we can say, don't read
No,
that.
no,
It will
I
take
love it. I
forever.
mean, this is what I
Oh,
live and
God.
love.
Oh, okay. Awake. So this is a prose poem. I called Michael and he told me he just got home from a wake. Oh, I'm sorry, I said. No, no, he said. It was the best wake I've ever been to. The funeral home was as warm and as cozy as anyone's living room. We had the greatest time. My friend looked wonderful, much better dead than alive. He wore his red and green Hawaiian shirt. He was the most handsome corpse I'd ever seen. They did such a good job. His daughter was there and a lot of old friends, and I had not seen in years. You know, he drank himself to death. He'd been on and off the wagon for years, but for some reason, this is what he ended up doing. As my friend kept talking, I thought of Lorca and what he wrote about death and Spain. Quote, a dead man in Spain is more alive as a dead man than any place else in the world, unquote. And quote, everywhere else, death is an end. Death comes and they draw the curtains. Not in Spain. In Spain, they open them. Many Spaniards live indoors until the day they die and are taken out into the sunlight.
Beautiful. I think this is the Spain that all these writers I read live in. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
they are so cheery about death. It's not even funny.
yeah,
I love how funny this poem is, and you're saying I'm
yeah.
sorry, and he says, no, 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 it was a
No,
great wake.
yeah, and this is also a poem that came quickly because I wrote it while I was on the phone with him.
Hmm.
I just wrote it because I was so taken by what he was saying. Then I just wrote it, and then so yeah, that
You
was
know,
a gift.
Kabir says, that which scares so many people gives me joy, and that death that is going to get you farther gets me closer. Um,
Yes, yeah,
so I was just reminded of that. Yeah,
yeah.
it's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Um, let's see. We were talking about how poets influence you, and I wanted to ask you if there is a poem of someone that comes to your mind often, that's perhaps not your poem, a poem that you would perhaps you'd wished you'd written, or you just love it and you keep going back to it. Which poem is that, and why?
The poem that came to mind when I saw the question was a poem by W.S. Merwin, who that passed away a few years ago now,
Hmm.
called Season, and it's in his collection called The Vixen. And I just I love this poem because it's a litany, so it's simply this, list. And he, I think that he manages to establish a sense of place in this poem that is just gorgeous. And um I've
Yeah, I
always
read you mentioned this to me, and I read it. It's beautiful.
yeah.
It reminds me of the Brooklyn Ferry that Walt Whitman wrote.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's where
Yes.
you were here before I was, and you're gonna be here when I'm gone.
Yes. Yeah. And also I think this poem, it ends up sort of making contact with that fact, with the person who is
Hmm.
no longer there. And how do you conjure that? And it seems like he's conjuring it via just mentioning what's happening in this time, this
Yeah,
hour. Yeah.
yeah. This moment becomes sort of that shuttle to
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, you will.
Yeah, I'd love for you to read that.
Okay, so this is
Yeah.
Season by W.S. Merwin. This hour along the valley, this light at the end of summer, lengthening as it begins to go, this whisper in the tawny grass, this feather floating in the air, this house of half a life or so, this blue door open to the lingering sun, this stillness echoing from the rooms like an unfinished sound, this fraying of voices at the edge of the village, beyond the dusty gardens, this breath of knowing without knowing anything, this old branch from which years and faces go on falling, this presence already far away, this restless alien in the cherished place, this motion with no measure, this moment peopled with absences, with everything that I remember here, eyes, the wheeze of the gate, greetings, bird songs in winter, the heart dividing, and everything that has slipped my mind as I consider the shadow. All this has occurred to somebody else who has gone, as I'm told, and indeed it has happened again and again, and I go on trying to understand how that could ever be, and all I know of them is what they felt in the light here in this late summer.
Beautiful. Um, I know of them is all I know of them is what they felt in the light. The feelings remain and they get transferred to different people and we're in the
Yes,
same places again and again and again. He repeats that, right?
yes.
So
And
gorgeous.
yeah, and also sort of talking about the presence and absence, people with absence. And yeah, there's this almost reversal of logic that becomes so almost mystical, I feel,
Hmm.
in that.
Yeah, and so you go back to this poem and think about it, or it reminds you. How does
Yeah,
this poem work on your mind?
yeah. I mean, I teach it to my
Hmm.
students. Like often I have to, teach poems. And so this is a poem I always teach because
Hmm.
I asked them to write a litany. Um, but I also think this is a poem I think about quite a bit, and yeah, and I return to myself as well. Um,
I was looking at your poems. I see it in one of your poems.
oh,
In the yellow head of a tulip.
oh, yeah.
Hey, that's in the yellow head of a tulip, in the sound of the wind entangled in the forest, in the haphazard combination of things. Um,
Hmm.
I love that one.
Oh, thank you.
Um, and it sort of ends uh, it ends in sort of a Dickinsonian way. Um, and I'm nobody and you're nobody too. Um,
Uh-huh. Yeah,
I'd love if you can read that.
I'm happy to.
I know we weren't planning on this, but this
Oh, no, I'm
is,
happy to read
is
it.
beautiful. Thank you.
Yes. In the yellow head of a tulip. In the yellow head of a tulip, in the sound of the wind entangled in the forest, in the haphazard combination of things for sale on the sidewalk, an iron next to a nail clipper, next to a can of soup, next to a starling's feather, in the silence inside of stone, in tea, in music, in desire, in butter, in torture, in space that flings itself out in the universe, in every direction at once without end. Despite walls, despite grates and ceilings and bulletproof glass, the sun falls through without refracting, in the wind hanging out its own sheets on all the empty clotheslines, in the bowels of rats, in their tiny moving architectures, in a world that is always moving, in those who are unable to speak but know how to listen, in your mother who is afraid of her own thoughts, in her fear, in her death, in her own derelict loneliness, in the garden late at night between the alder tree and the ash. She rocks herself to sleep in the hammock, a little drunk and wayward, in everything she is that you're not, in the well of the skull, in the fish that you touch, in the copper water, in its breath of water, in your breath, the single bubble rising. That could be you, that could be me, that could be nothing.
Gorgeous. I love the end of this. In its breath of water, in your breath, the single bubble rising. That could be you, that could be me, that could be nothing. Of course, the bubble is rising and it's temporary. I'm. It reminds you of the poem I'm meditating right now on is a poem about spring. It's by Bhagat Ravidas, who's a spiritual writer in from India. He writes about mushroom. He's like,
Mm.
and so the title of on the title of the poem it says spring, and then he goes in right into monsoon. He's like,
Oh,
the water's falling, and all these mushrooms are sprouting up,
yeah.
and oh my, oh my mind, why are you like a mushroom sprouting, standing up with all this pride? You're gonna be nothing tomorrow.
Yeah, nice.
That was a good segue into spring, and uh,
Mm.
I remember when I said let's do a poem on flowers, spring, and you said it's not really about spring or flowers, but it ends there. So
Yes.
I was gonna suggest I've been meditating on two spring poems.
Okay.
Nowhere in the body of the poem it says spring. Like this poem is about monsoon, and it
Yeah.
talks about the cuckoo birds, singing,
Hmm.
and they appearing like crows sitting on your head. Um,
Let me find my spring poem. I thought, because I have another, actually, here it is. Okay. This is called Spring,
okay.
and I'll just read this. This is a newer. Spring. Sometimes it happens without a moment's notice. We die. We just die. The way Luigi did, and Faste Barbro. When I was little, she showed me how to tie my shoes and how to iron wrinkled handkerchiefs into pressed and folded perfection. Sometimes I don't know what I see. On an airplane once, we landed in fog, or what I first thought was billowing smoke, until I noticed along the runway, as the airplane roared to a stop, an orchard of blooming apple trees, a blizzard of fine white blooms.
Mm, wow, that's gorgeous. Sometimes you don't know what you see. It happens to me all the time.
Me too.
And it goes back to the poem I was talking about. You think you're a mushroom and you're going to conquer the world, and
Yeah.
you stand up with all the pride, and we just die. You just
Yeah, right? Yes, we do.
I love this.
It
So this is not a poem that's been published yet.
hasn't been published. It's not even, I mean, it's almost finished, I think, but
Hmm.
yeah, I'm still kind of working on it a little bit.
Well, I'm glad
Yeah.
we got to hear something that's new and is uh, is going to be out soon. Two questions left. One on a poem that is inspired by either a poet, a singer, an artist, or a writer. And then I have one other question. But
Yes.
which poem would you pick?
So I think I would pick a poem called 131st Street. It's really was inspired by the American photographer Walker Evans.
Hmm.
I saw his exhibit in a particular exhibit of his called Simple Secrets.
Hmm.
And it's a book too, a book of photographs. And I it wasn't one particular photograph, but it was the experience of the entire exhibit that led me to write this.
Beautiful. Let's hear it.
Okay. 131st Street. Tonight, one half of the moon's face looks down at us and our earthly secrets that are invisible even in daylight, except in certain photographs where you might see something commonplace, like laundry flying high over backyards in Queens or California. Different size shirts hung in the sunlight with their sleeves down, or like plain water in a glass passing over the trembling lips of an elderly and bedridden woman and swallowed in small gulps. Or it is possible you'll glimpse in passing a warm and loving exchange between two strangers reflected for a single moment in an ornate bureau mirror traveling on a flatbed truck stopped at a red light here on 131st Street. I have never wanted to visit outer space, though I have often thought about how it never ends, and how that is the reason a shoe is a secret, or a circus signboard is a secret, showing the four hooves of a horse balancing on a painted red ball, or a leaf, or a hat carried on the head of a boy, or on the head of a woman riding the subway alone into the evening, or for that matter, the evening itself as it gives way to night, and the secret that is yet another night, as well as a garment woven out of unnumbered fine black threads.
Gorgeous. The precision of unnumbered. Um, there is a count, but you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
I love it.
Oh,
I love it. It's about secrets, about mystery, about infinity. It's a quintessential Malena poem.
oh,
Uh, I
thank you.
have I've started to build a persona of, what Malena does. She's traveling in a train or she's on a plane or she's walking and some kid says something to her and then she sees infinity and then she shows it to us, whoever gets to
Oh,
read it. Uh, I always try to find refrains because I'm into songs. Uh,
yeah.
so the refrain I found in this poem. I have refrains for all your poems. Um, I in this poem it is I have never wanted to visit outer space.
Mm, nice.
Um, because this is sort of Malena. It's I am happy with the train and the house and the
Yeah.
looking at the apartments where
Yeah.
um through the windows of the train. Um
Yeah. Yeah.
and it reminded me of Bhagat Ramanand's poem. He is Kabir's guru. So
Okay.
he's you know
Previous,
Kabir
before.
is 550 years old, so he's
Yeah.
600 years old.
Wow.
Um, so he says, "Kat jaiye re ghar lago rang." Where should I go? Uh, because I'm colored, and that's in a spring poem too. Again, he
Oh,
he says nothing about. It has no mention of flowers, just the title. Um, so you're supposed to sing it in the rag of flowers, but
Mm-hmm.
but the poem itself doesn't say anything about flowers. It
Oh,
talks about color. Um,
oh,
he starts saying, one day I really wanted to meet my love, and I went out and I looked for him, and the flower told me, and I'm translating God to flower, or a
yes,
guru to flower. So
yeah.
the flower told me, where should I go? Why do I need to go to outer space?
Mm-hmm.
I am colorful inside. So
Oh,
I
yeah.
love this line, and I
Oh,
have never wanted to visit outer space because you would die.
yes. It's enough to be here. Yeah, it's a lot to just be here. Yeah.
And I love the words you use. There's, I'm sure some of that is intentional, but do you think there's a lot of mystery in this poem, right? You start with the one half of the moon. Of course, there's,
Mm-hmm.
something is revealed, something is not. And then
Mm-hmm.
you talk about the earthly secrets, and then do you really want the laundry to be showing? But, the photographs have them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Tell me, uh, is it always intentional that you have these mysteries hidden in the words in the poems, or do the words themselves surprise you sometimes, your own words?
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, no, I mean, I think that I don't think that I'm writing something imbued with mystery necessarily at all. I think what I do is I see something, and if I'm on a train, while I was living in New York, a lot of this book was written, a story was written in New York.
Hmm.
Um, when you're on a train, it's a different vantage point. I mean,
Hmm.
even a car is, of course, also a bicycle, they all have their vantage points, but in walking, flying, I don't know, there's just, you see something very ordinary, like, and I think the photographs of Walker Evans, there was a lot of photographs of laundry, and there was also photographs of people on the subway,
Hmm.
and having studied the photographs, it allowed me to see that, wow, that is this very simple detail
Hmm.
is actually mysterious and very strange and extraordinary. Um,
Hmm.
so I think that's really it just became a meditation on that, and you know um, the sort of the mystery of the everyday, and but also the idea that um, the simple secrets appeal to me. The
Hmm.
simple secrets. That most people won't notice because most of us are rushing too much.
This is why I love your poetry, because it's so approachable. I can read it, and I might not understand all of it in my first read. And so, but I still got something from it in my first read.
Oh,
Versus sometimes I read poetry and it just goes from the top of my head, and I'm reluctant to uh, read a second time, because I don't really know if there's anything more, or is this just play. But what I found with your poetry is you read it once, you already love it, and then you read it more, and then you learn a little more, and you can meditate on it. So thank you
hmm.
for your
Oh,
your
thank you.
beautiful, beautiful work. Um, and as you were talking about trains, and I'm going to add a couple of things that I wasn't planning on doing. So
Yeah.
bear with me.
Oh, of
Um,
course.
I this is one of my favorite poems, that I found in your other book, the Ocean Avenue book, which is your first book, I believe.
Hmm.
It's on page 28. It's called Among Pillars of Dust. This is
Oh,
where
yeah.
you're at Grand Central. And this one was special to me because I lived in Connecticut, and I used to go to Grand Central all the time. So
Oh,
when you're
yeah.
talking about those trains, I'm
You know
relating
it.
to it.
Yes,
And
you know them well.
I would be one of those people who was circumambulating the cafes,
Yes,
lost.
you're in this poem, in other words.
Exactly.
Yeah. This poem, I wrote it for one of my teachers, Gerald Stern, who was a great American poet. He just passed away about a year and a half ago. And yes, Among Pillars of Dust for Jerry. I was going to be a tightrope walker in a circus or a trapeze artist when I grew up. But here I am, still on the ground, on the stone floor in Grand Central Station, only a little ecstatic from looking up at the constellations in the green and gold ceiling. I'm moved by the way the light falls down in pillars of dust through the high windows, as if into a barn or a well. I walk slowly through the rush hour crowd, which is moving in all directions. I circumambulate the information booth. I recite a poem to myself without uttering a word, without making a face. I descend it line by line, a stairwell that is also a kind of stage. I listen to the skinny violinist play Paganini under the big clock. I notice the sorrow in his face. I stand still, letting the music touch me, feel the whole station inside my skull, the echoes bouncing back and forth between my temples, while the trench coats jog by, while the trains gallop out of the city, and the beggars continue to beg.
This is beautiful. You made me understand one of these old poems by Guru Nanak where he says, he's asked the question, why do you sing? And, it feels like you were answering the question, why do you do poetry? And he says, "Oh, it's not just me singing, but look at the planets; they're singing, and look at the this that's." And he comes,
Yeah.
and look at the forest; they're singing. The wind is singing, and every element is singing. So
Yeah.
I'm singing because that's who I am.
Yes.
And so this goes to everything that you say here is about oneness, and I absolutely love it. If there's one poem I recommend everyone reading, it's this, Among Pillars of Dust, page 28 on Ocean Avenue. What I'm very interested in, and what a lot of my listeners are interested in, they do their own translations of these old poetry that they are spiritually connected to.
Yeah.
So a lot of my listeners do these translations. I'd love to ask you what if you can give your 2-minute advice on how to translate poetry, or give some suggestions to folks who are listening to these poems and taking them from one language to another. Who have you learned from, and maybe an example of something that you've translated?
Translation is I do a lot of translation as well, and I teach a class on translation, which allows me to keep really reflecting and sort of studying certain texts over and over again. And something that I come back to, or that we come back to in our discussions, is a quote by Thomas Tranströmer, the Swedish poet, the late Swedish poet, Nobel laureate. I will read you the quote. It goes, "A poem is a manifestation of an invisible poem that exists beyond the conventional languages. Therefore, a translation of a poem into a new language is an opportunity to attempt to realize the original invisible poem." So that is something that, of course, comes up because, as you know, you're a translator. You can't translate a poem as though it was a math problem because a poem is always more than the sum of its parts. So inevitably, there is a, you know, it's a metamorphosis of sorts. And so when I think of, and I also happen to think that even writing poem, when I write my poems or anybody writes a poem in their, maybe it's their native language, that's also translation. I mean, that's, there is probably nothing that is not translation. It's possible that you are now translating what I am saying. And so that seamlessness of the process is something that I'm intrigued by. And when I teach a translation class, I don't necessarily want my students to become literary translators. They may, but it's just a way to enrich the writing process, and also absolutely to sort of expose, poets from all around the world. I find that's very important, to have students to read widely.
By the way, and I heard this, and so I've copied it, like the best pickpocket I am, I'm gonna pickpocket
Yes.
this phrase. Invisible
Yeah.
poem. I already put that
Okay.
in my
Yes.
favorite phrases.
Yeah.
It's a Billy Collins poem that talks about we're all pickpockets. We're stealing
Yes. Yes.
these things from each other.
Yes.
Uh,
I think it was T.S. Eliot who said, bad poets borrow and good poets steal. Which also goes to, that makes me think about the fact that it's all one conversation that takes place over, time and space. Poetry, it's a huge conversation. That's all it is.
So the two phrases I learned from you was, one was the invisible poem behind the poem, and the other one that I really loved, and I believe it was also from someone else. You talked about poems are not really poems; they're meeting places, and how true that is. And I see that in every poem. And then sometimes it's meeting places for multiple poets. There's two poets talking to each other, and then you're the third person, and then you're talking to others, and there's so many people meeting.
Yes, and that was Thomas Tranströmer who he's talked about poems as meeting places, that his poems were meeting places. Yeah.
Guru Nanak, obviously, he says poems are pilgrimages. So you don't need to
Yeah.
go to a place. You need to go to a poem.
Yes. Oh, that's lovely. I love that. That's wonderful.
We've come to the end of the hour, but I want to
Yeah.
continue this forever, like one of your poems. But because we live in time,
Yes.
and we have to end somewhere, I'd love to. And I read this poem yesterday for the first time, and I love it.
Yanis Ritsos was a 20th century Greek poet who was immensely prolific. He may have written like 97 books of poetry or something like that. So yeah, I wrote this. This is an example of poems come from poems. He has a poem named called Dusk. And I took the first line of that poem. That's the first line of this poem. So yeah, so it's called After Ritsos. You know that moment in the summer dusk when the sunbathers have all gone home to mix drinks and you are alone on the beach, when the waves begin to nibble on the abandoned sandcastles, and further out over the erupted face of the water, stained almost pink, there are a few clouds that hold entire rooms inside of them, rooms where no one lives, in the hair of the light that soon will go gray and then black. It's the moment when even the man who mops the floor in the execution room of the prison stops to look up into the silence that grows like smoke or the dusk itself, and your mind becomes almost visible, and you know there is nothing that is not mysterious, and that no moment is less important than this moment, and that imprisonment is not possible.
There is nothing that is not mysterious, and that no moment is less important than this moment, and that imprisonment is not possible. I mean, mystery, moment, salvation. Um, my mother would call this a Bollywood masala movie because you have
Oh,
everything in it. You have live action comedy,
yeah.
for a spiritual reader, you can't have more of masala than this. It completes sort of a dinner. So thank you for that sumptuous meal.
Oh,
I
thank you
do
so much.
have a present for you.
Oh,
So
wow.
I'm going to read it to you.
Okay.
How far away is your happiness? I think you can take a cab there. The farthest star in the galaxy of Andromeda. What will become of us? In order to live, we must all sleep, and the man sitting next to me is eating himself up. The world is gone like the exact shape of a cloud. In your breath, the single bubble rising. Anything is possible, clinging to everything. The ocean does not have an address.
Oh,
So that
that's a cento. You call
that's
that?
a cento.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow, I feel so honored.
Thank you so much.
That's
I know anything that you give in return would be less for your time,
oh,
but this is a little offering.
oh, thank you so much. That's really beautiful. Oh my gosh. And I
It
just
is
want to,
beautiful. It's beautiful because they're your words.
well, the way you did combine them. And that was just, I feel honored.
No, thank you so much, and I absolutely loved it.
No, thank you again so much.
Okay,
I'm grateful.
bye.
Bye.